welcome all of you to the new presentation that the Luxembourg Chamber is organizing. Is alternative data the new oil? Big question. And I think as we're making our way through COVID, we will know that we have all realized that the data has become a very active element. Technology is ever further developing. And we have our today's speaker, Robert Martinez, Chief Revenue Officer of Battlefield, is going to tell us more about this subject. I want to thank Seth Rao of the Secretary Line and member of the Luxembourg Chamber, who's going to lead the interview. First, a little housekeeping. We will mute everyone, and if you have any particular questions, you can raise your hands through the chat. We will have a question and answer at the end of the presentation, and we will also be recording the presentation. So, more on alternative data is what Rob is going to tell us. And essentially the discussion is how reliable is it, and what are, for all of us outsiders, the concerns for privacy. What is the cost of collecting this alternative data? And also, of course, for today's topic, how has COVID-19 impacted the alternative data, and how we all dealing with this subject matter? Or how is our data being treated and our privacy? So to that effect, Rob and Seth, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing more of this.
Thank you, Michel. I would also like to thank the fabulous team at LACC for putting all this together and making it happen.
Before you proceed, I have two more things. I want to thank all the guests for joining us. I believe that we organized this event here in collaboration with the AmCham in Luxembourg. I want to thank them for the participation, and as well as the Luxembourg Chamber in New York the Luxembourg Chamber in Luxembourg that we've been working with, and the relationship, thanks to COVID-19 lockdown, we have been developing this relationship further and further, and we very much look forward to maintaining this. We also were to have special guests today that are joining us. One including representative of the Luxembourg Embassy in Washington, D.C. And also, I believe, the Honorary Consul Ron Baza was to join us. I'm not sure if he's present, but if he's not present, we miss him. And if he's present, we welcome him. So then, thank you again to Janet and to Tony for organizing this. And now, Seth, I'm really done.
Thanks, Michel. So I kept hearing about alternative data about 6 or 7 years ago, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Everybody talked about big data. So what's the difference? And I started digging, and at that time I had met Rob, and he was just getting into it. So he became my expert go-to person to explain all of this. So over the years, I learned quite a bit from Rob about alternative data, and I think that people out there, it's a very emerging field. It's just starting out. And Rob has been immersed in it for the last few years, neck deep in it, and he understands how it works. So I had firsthand knowledge, and I thought maybe it would be a good idea to share it with the rest of the world, what this all means. So having said that, let's, without further ado, let's go to the interview. Tony?
Tony, you need to unmute your microphone.
And it really takes us back to, it's really new data that's entered the marketplace. So if you think about traditional data, whether it be pricing information, fundamental information, if you think about the way companies are looked at and decisions are made today, specifically in capital markets, a lot of it is what happened last quarter. Due to enhanced compute processes, as well as the ability to extract data and store data, storing being a cheaper piece, there's this new thing called alternative data. And really, it's a wide range of things. It could be credit card data. It could be foot traffic information. It could be satellite data. It's really designed to provide insights of what's going on with the company here and now, and reported in more of a near real-time type of basis. So investors and even decision makers can make more informed decisions based on more current types of information.
Okay. Well, is it, how does it compare to big data? Is it a subset? Is it part of it? We keep hearing big data and alternative data. What's the difference?
So I would say that they probably go hand in hand.
Okay.
If you think about the way that, what's kind of in vogue, right? And so, and what is the word of the day? Big data, financial technology, fintech, et cetera. Big data was several years ago. Alternative data is here and now. It's interesting, back in 2008, when I was working at a firm called Revere Data, we had supply chain data. That was novel to the marketplace. Looking at the companies, who they were doing business with, and what the supply and demand curve looked like at that point in time was relevant to investors, but it took time for that adoption to take place. I would argue that that was alternative data back then. So really, I guess, to put the the cherry on the icing on the cake, alternative data is really data that is not mainstream today, but is moving towards that mainstream area.
What's the catalyst that's making it move to the mainstream? I mean, why now?
I think it's the desire for data company insights. Why now? Traditional reporting, based on the current environment that we're in, and within COVID-19, really has dampened the investor's ability, or even the decision maker's ability, to understand what's going on at the ground level within an organization. I mean, even if you look at like the exodus from the larger cities that are going on, people want to understand, the housing market. People want to understand office markets. People want to really kind of understand more in near real time what's going on, and so that's really what's driven that type of thing.
When you say understand, are you talking about collecting existing data or finding existing data that's past or in real time, or are you projecting, or how? What's the nitty-gritty of this alternative data?
So if you think of a Home Depot, for example, so we've heard that, not even heard, we know that finding wood these days has been challenging. Finding Unilock has been delayed. All those building supplies, home improvement supplies that people have been spending tons and tons of time, doing in their free time at home, working from home, and finding those additional hours, like myself, 4 hours a day, no longer commuting, has given me some time to do some housing projects too. That said, if you think about real-time data, let's not even think real-time. Let's just think, I want to understand what happened this past week. And let's say that I've got sensors. Let's say that my phone, our phone, there's a lot of telling information that's on there. Every app that I opt into, in essence, is basically me opting into people, not even people, but data collection. So if you think about email receipt data, so I just order something from Home Depot. Okay, if I'm using some of those receipt apps to file those, which is a prudent thing to do, then ultimately that data is potentially being collected. So now my receipt from Home Depot is being collected. It's anonymized. It's not saying it's for Rob Martinez, but when you start aggregating that from tons and tons of users, you start deriving great insight into how that particular store is doing. If you're looking at foot traffic, again, my phone is giving off, if I have my location turned on, I'm giving off information that now I've geo-fenced, or I've put a fence around the store. I can walk into that store. It knows that I'm in Home Depot. It's funny, sometimes I'll listen to Pandora when I mow the lawn. I'll be mowing the lawn. I'm getting Home Depot advertisements. And so, if you think about the technology is a dual-edged sword. It's given us, great capabilities to stay connected, but it's also given us great capabilities for others to understand what we're doing and what we're up to. That type of alternative data can now really drive and inform decision makers as to what decisions, what questions they have, and how do I get those decisions through alternative data.
There's a couple of things that were quite interesting in what you just said. One of them is the privacy aspect of it and anonymizing the data. And the other is, whether you opt into geolocation or whether you have geolocation enabled on your phone, right? So can you talk a little bit more about these two issues?
Well, I'm sure some people have heard of what's GDPR, right? Which was an initiative that came out of London, or out of Europe, out of the EU, who, they take privacy very seriously. And really opt-in is really stating that in order for me to pick up the phone and call you, you have to have said, yes, I'm willing for you to pick up the phone and call you. US a little bit more lenient on those capabilities. I would say California was kind of an early adopter, and some of the states are moving forward towards a GDPR type of regulation at this point. But it is the individual consumer, when you think about it, you are the owner of this data. And I think it's recognized by that. And that's why when you log on to an app, the apps ask you if you are going to provide permissions to do whatever. If you basically participate in that app, there's terms and conditions. If you read the fine print, I bet you would say that you're getting that data, your data is being looked at and being analyzed, anonymized. So there is always anonymization behind that. But at the end of the day, and this is probably going to, come to a head at some point. You are the owner of that data at the end of the day. But you're opting in saying that, yes, company ABC, you can collect that information, anonymize it, and potentially sell it out to the broader marketplace.
Now, on the issue of whether this data is clean, how many people are actually going to opt into it, are you going to get the desired results from collecting this data and crunching the data?
Well, some of the key questions when you're really looking at alternative data is you want to understand the panel size. How big is the panel? How diverse is the panel? Is it only being collected from an Android phone? Is it being collected from both Apple and an Android phone? All those, what's the demographic behind that? Is it, they do look at, and I don't want to say, they do identify through certain, various artificial intelligence, whether it's potentially a male, a female, different age groups, demographic groups, etc. And so really there's questions you want to be asking around those data sets as to, how much coverage, how much time, how much turnover in the panel is going on. I've worked with firms that, have, huge amounts of turnover, which is probably not a good thing. So you want to have history behind that, especially if you're going to be using it in capital markets.
Now, when you say panels, what exactly does a panel entail?
So a panel would entail, who has opted in, the group that has basically opted into a particular product or a service. So in other words, if I'm using, I don't know, some type of geolocation type of data set. You know, is that, what's the demo, you know, is that a global? Are there people that, is this around the world? People that are opted in? Is it just United States? Is it, what does that ultimate demographic look like?
What other methods does somebody who wants to collect alternative data besides geolocation? What would they be using? Besides foot traffic and geolocation.
You got geolocation, you've got web scraping capabilities, so you can go in and scrape different websites. So everybody's probably heard about like airline tickets, things along those lines. Shipping data. So there's groups out there that collect global, basically bills of lading on what cargo ships are shipping. You've got survey data. So there's firms out there that collect data that will send out surveys. And it's really designed around what is the consumer going to, what are you doing? What is this consumer going to do? And so you think about alternative data can be informative all along those. So if you think about the surveys that people either get on the phone, get via mail, et cetera, that would be one way. So what am I going to do? Then there's sentiment firms out there that, what am I doing? What actually am I doing? So I may do that on Twitter. So there's a firm out there that does like emotion-based types of activities. And then of course you've got what companies, what actually happens, point of sales information that's out there. What actually, so what did I say I was going to do? What am I doing? What did I do? Right? And so you think about the informative play all along those paths.
Well, considering you have this many different points of information that's coming in, and also you're looking at whether somebody has opted in or not, how do you verify the data? I mean, what is it that's going to make somebody comfortable and say this is accurate?
It varies. And so if you think, so from a capital markets, and if I'm going to trade that information, typically they would love to have 5 to 10 years of history, historical information. So they want to go back and see, was that data informative? The interesting piece, Seth, is that in a lot of cases that data is not available. And so there's a firm that I can think of that, puts out sensors. So they basically put out, camera, they put out radar, and they're not looking into facilities, but they're around facilities. And so they could be tracking, traffic. They could be, it's no different. I like to call them their persistent channel checks, right? So historically, funds have been known to put out, folks that just sit on the street corner and count cars or count, they're just clicking what's going on. I mean, when I walk into Grand Central Station, getting off the train, when I used to do that, there'd be somebody there standing there with a clicker. How many people got off the train? And so with technology, now you can do what I like to call persistent channel checks. I mean, all you have to do is go to any area and look around, and there's cameras everywhere. And so, ultimately, you can train the machine to understand, wow, that's a person, that's a truck, that's, ABC that just walked by. And so, they talk about this thing called ground truth, right, which you've heard. And so you're not going to, as those things come online, I mean, it's the truth that that camera just picked up that truck that just drove by. And so while so faith in it, I think it is to the individual to ultimately determine whether that's true or not. So in some cases, in this case for capital markets, it's history. In my mind, for something that, what I would call a persistent channel check, maybe I don't need that history, if I were a trader or a decision maker.
But how valuable is it to the capital markets, this data, whether it's historical or not, or whether it's persistent?
I think it's extremely valuable for them to participate in this. Like I said, companies for years, I think I said it earlier in the discussion, but for years companies have reported, this is what happened last quarter. now we're really holding companies accountable to what's happening here and now. And I think those insights, if you're not looking at those insights, at least in including that as part of your decision-making process, you're probably missing the boat.
Okay. Have you seen a lot of ROI and adoption of this technology?
It's growing, and you know, with the COVID-19, I think it kind of increased the catalyst. It was kind of a catalyst to make it grow a little bit faster.
How so?
Because I don't think, you know, companies were not reporting, you know, the same types of, they didn't have the same types of reporting requirements, at least during the early parts of COVID-19. So, you know, quarterly reports were pushed out, you know, even our individual taxes were pushed out for a period of time. So there was a desire to get additional information, and I think that put some of these companies to the forefront. You know, even from an employment perspective, right? Things happen so quickly where the unemployment rate went way down really fast, right? Or the unemployment rate went up really fast, and then ultimately, you know, people wanted to understand, and there's groups out there that are tracking, you know, on basically job apps, you know, when jobs get posted, job postings. And so that's just another form of alternative data that can provide deep insight.
Okay. Have you seen companies see a lot of ROI on this? I mean, is there like a mad rush for this data, or what's going on in the industry now?
They don't disclose ROI. What I will say is that you know, you've got the haves that have really built out the data science teams and put the infrastructure in place to pull in this data, process it. I mean, it's not trivial in a lot of cases, connecting the data. You know, it sounds very glamorous, but there's a lot of work behind it. And so several of the larger firms have really put forth the effort to, won't even say the effort, made the investment to build that process out. And what I am saying is you're starting to see your larger asset management firms, not necessarily hedge funds, but the asset management firms that are either A, hiring data scientists, B, putting these types of processes in place, and really trying to hop into this marketplace. I think they do recognize that there is a need to understand this data, and it's not going to go away.
But you mentioned that it takes a lot of effort to get this off the ground. What would be typical cost to do something like this, to set up your own operation or do some kind of alternative data operation?
So we project, you know, by the time you hire a couple of data scientists, by the time you put some of your, you know, infrastructure in place, and you know, everybody's moved to the cloud now, but you know, some of those that actually made the investment, you know, put their infrastructure in place. You need data analysts, you need the compute power. We project, you know, it's about a $800,000 per year investment by the time you hire and put infrastructure in place. And so that's why you see companies like Battlefin, you know, you see Amazon Data Exchange, you see all these companies that are moving into this space to hopefully provide more streamlined and efficient solutions for the firms that are moving in those directions.
Is there, I mean, obviously you have some big players in there like Amazon. So is there, let's talk about the cybersecurity issues. I mean, what if the data gets corrupted by malicious actors or somebody trying to steal the data? Or
I mean, the cyber piece is critical. I mean, you think about all these alternative data providers who have spent years and years and years building out their IP, their crown jewels, right? We like to say in the cyber world, and they're parking it up on the cloud. And so, absolutely. I mean, we take cyber very serious. We want to ensure that, you know, people's data is locked down. In fact, one of the pieces that we did early on and continue to do is, you know, within our sandboxes where people can go in and test data, there's no upload or download of that information. if a firm does want to take the data behind the firewall, then there's a separate request that has to happen. But the idea is that you have to have those types of pieces in place in order to successfully thwart any.
Is there any use of machine learning or AI algorithms within the operation of or collecting the alternative data and crunching it?
There are, some of the firms are, and really, like I mentioned, the one that does emotions-based kind of intelligence. They basically have built the largest emotion annotated database. I think it's 150 million different tweets that they ultimately analyzed, or I shouldn't say tweet. I mean, Twitter is a part of it, but there's other social media that they look at as well. Whether it be Reddit or other types of text. But the idea is that the machine, and I won't say like AI, and let's not, or natural language processing, let's not kid ourselves that, you still have to have that supervision initially to even get to that level. And so you've got to build out those types of, emotional annotations or, whatever you're looking to do, you still have to go through that. You still have to plow that field in order to get to that level of AI, which
So you're talking,
in itself is an expense.
so you're talking about a bias-based, the injection of bias into any kind of algorithm that may produce the wrong results.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, that was wonderful. Seth, to you.
Yeah. Well, I think we already have a couple of questions, for, at least one question. Can you get an app? Can you get an app without accepting the opt-in, Rob?
Well, have you all tried to, so the short answer is no. In most cases, you can't. Like if you say, like if, let's say the phone wants to access ABC and you hit deny, typically you don't get access. So it's kind of the same from that perspective as well, is if you don't opt in to do it, you won't get the app, which is an interesting piece. So we should all probably be reading the fine print and not just going straight and saying accept. And Seth, that's really in your wheelhouse from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Well, I think it's more of a privacy issue. I don't know if you really have a choice in just saying, I don't want this app, or accept or not accept. I don't know if you really have a choice, especially if the app is free. So how many people actually read that entire acceptance document, right? It's usually legalese and most people don't understand it. And that's about it. You just accept because you want the benefits of that app. So we did have a comment about DMIS Data and FactSet. Rob, are you familiar with these companies? And if you could talk about them?
Yeah, JE brought up Demist.com. And so Demist is a company, they are an aggregator. They do focus, from what I understand, on mainly in the insurance marketplace. And then FactSet, another big player in the capital markets, financial services. They have a fundamental data, but they also have done some of the mapping for some of the some alternative data companies. Same with Bloomberg. I'm sure you all have heard of the Bloomberg name. And then Battlefin does work with Refinitiv, or the old Thomson Reuters. S&P is coming into the space. I know that Moody's is moving into the space. And so you're seeing movement not only from smaller firms like Battlefin, Eagle Alpha, New Data, but you're also seeing movements from Evidence Labs at UBS. So it's certainly a growing space. And the projections for data output that they're just through the roof. at this point. So data is going to continue. We live in a data world. We're going to continue to see it. It's funny, you've heard data is the new oil. Our marketing guy says data is the new water. So it's definitely coming.
One question I had for you is, we talk a lot about this data being important to the financial companies. Do you see any movement outside of the financial and maybe the technology companies wanting to get into alternative data, like a retailer or somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, you see, like in marketing and advertising, I mean, those particular spaces are, obviously leveraging alternative data for retail advertising, and it's kind of interesting. While there's a longer sales cycle from the corporate side, they are hopping into the marketplace. I would say there's a longer sales cycle, but the barriers to entry are a little bit lower. Whereas in capital markets, they want this historical data. They want, they want to be producing alpha. In the corporates, they really want to inform the decision-making process and make better decisions. So, corporates is really where we see the exponential growth to occur. In fact, NASDAQ, who recently bought a firm called Quandl, who is another alternative data provider. I think their CEO said that it's a $7 billion marketplace as you look, looking forward. It's definitely growing. And so today you see the projections of 1 to 2 billion. You see, when you overlay the corporates, that's where it goes exponential.
Okay. So I think any other questions from anyone? Oh, okay.
So what I would propose, one of the co-founders of Battlefin, he's a legal and compliance lawyer. So he certainly would be a great person to pull in and have that type of conversation. I think this whole market and data. And yes, I mean there is certainly some some red flags that have been thrown up, especially from credit card transaction data and things along those lines. We certainly need to number one, make sure that data. Sorry. We need to make sure that your data is protected, anonymized. And, I think it's interesting. I think that the data and technology has outrun the legal and compliance pieces. And so we're producing data at such velocity that, legal and compliance and, even our laws are they're trying to catch up. And so it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think that you are going to see more regulation over time. It's just, when ultimately. And the question is what is that line where they say, nope, you're just shut down from a data perspective until we figure this out? I don't know if that's going to happen, but it'd be great maybe to have Mark or somebody along those lines come and speak from that perspective, because I think that's key for all of us as consumers and individuals.
I have a follow-up question to that. You talk about anonymizing the data. Do you think that there's going to be, what are the chances of the anonymization of the data breaking down? And you have leaks of personal info and so on. I mean, how stable is that? I mean, can we really trust that?
I mean, I think that I think there's always ways to connect the dots with multiple data sets. I think that's what you're driving at. But I think, and so I think that that's where you could say, in this demographic, this person, like some of the firms are putting in that type of protection. So like some of the employment data, that are getting down to like the census block levels are saying you've got to have X amount of people that have this type of position, that hold this type of position, that live in this different location. So as long as those thresholds are set, I think that's you could probably feel relatively at ease, but if those thresholds get too relaxed, then you could see issues.
I'm always interested in how I can get to the data, find a way to get to it, right? Or sneak into it or hack it. So that's why I was asking about the anonymization, but that's a whole new different topic, hacking into data.
Yep. And that is one thing. I mean, if you think about these marketplaces too, from a cyber perspective, I mean, these are truly the crown jewels of those individual companies that have done, collected that type of data, and they built businesses around buying and selling this data. And so the cyber aspect is critical on many levels. And so, I think that's where, my son, who's, recent graduate of college, I've said, look, go into cyber, go into big data, because that's truly where that's truly where this world is going.
Well, I mean, for me, it's, if somebody's targeting alternative data company, all that data is already set and waiting for me there, right? Including how they anonymized it. So the connection between the data sets, it's all sitting there waiting for me. I've hit the mother lode, in other words.
I have a follow-up question on this subject. Is like, what about the new the data collection with clothing and in the fashion industry? I know of a company called Eon that is teaming up with Microsoft on collecting data information from fashion industry, because the fashion industry, once they sell their clothing, they lose the contact with the client. So this would be one way of maintaining contact with their customers.
That's interesting. I don't think I saw that piece. So you're saying that basically a product gets sold and then Microsoft is identifying who purchased that?
The buyer has an opt-in option to maintain contact with the fabrication or with the vendor or with the company. Let's say Brooks Brothers, makes a pair of pants, and whoever the new owner is of the pair of pants can opt in to share information and contact and with the company, because the fashion industry is realizing that once their clothing are sold, there goes the clothing, and they lose the contact and communication with the customer. Google the company called Eon, E-O-N.
Okay.
And Microsoft.
Interesting. That's I mean, there's a couple of companies. I've got them. There's a couple of companies out there that I know that are tracking like online, and it's basically clickstream, and they're looking at what people select or what they're putting into their carts, or what color is the blouse, or what's pair of pants, and it's more really designed around understanding what's the demand, what's the color of the year, what's things along with what's appealing to people. But I will definitely, Michelle, I'll definitely be reaching out to Ion because that's taken it to a whole nother level. That now it's and it's true. It's that grassroots movement. Can you get down to the individual level and connect with your client, right?
Yeah.
Rob, just on the chat stream, we've got 2 new questions. One from Susan. I don't know if you can see the chat stream there.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much.
All data company. So Susan asks if you all can click with all data companies out there collecting and selling. Is this redundant? And all the companies putting such value on this commodity, is this something similar to the Tulip Pipe certain point with data? Like I said kind of earlier, at least in the talk with Seth, In my mind, companies historically, so when you think about publicly traded companies, they're reporting to us what happened last quarter. You know, what were their sales, what were their revenues, et cetera. I think in this case, data collection, you're really seeing where you've got the potential to see, and no single data set is really that golden ticket, right? You need to kind of put you need to collect all the answers to the test to get the right answer. And so you need to understand, you know, what is the consumer saying they're going to do? You know, what are they actually doing? Did they actually transact that? Make that, you know, complete that transaction. And that's what, you know, you can see with this type of data as we start, you know, as we continue to grow and more data continues to get produced. You can get closer to a full understanding, you know, how is that company performing? So I think, you know, I do think that data eventually will become a commodity. I think right now it can provide great edge, but I think as we start getting more and more connected, you know, go back 10 years, we were talking about market globalization. Well, now we're talking about kind of a data globalization and really that data kind of revolution where you can start connecting. And, you know, it's expensive right now to connect those data sets, but as that price goes down, the data, you're going to be able to ask many questions and get those answers on the fly. And not only at the institutional level, but at the individual consumer level is kind of what I would love to see happen ultimately. And then the next question, can you speak to third-party risk management in this space in terms of right to be forgotten? If you're supplying data from third parties, who's responsible for verifying compliance? So again, that is, you know, more internal compliance. So yes, there is a right to be forgotten piece that's really tied to, I believe that's GDPR. But as I understand it, there are checks and balances like within the company. So Battlefin is a company aggregator, but some of the larger firms that are actually collecting and producing this data have already put in place areas where an individual would get tagged once they say they want to be forgotten, that can be executed and checked on. So, you know, firms are thinking about this at this point, and it's probably going to happen more and more over time.
I think that's it. I don't think there's any more questions. Seth, anything else from your side?
I think we're good. Robert, any thoughts? Any final thoughts on before we close out?
No, I appreciate you all taking the time to listen to Seth and I. I mean, as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about this topic. Please feel free to, you know, reach out to myself, Seth, or you know, through the chamber. You know, any questions, and you know, always here to help and talk further.
Michelle?
Well, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Robert. That was great presentation. Thank you, Seth, for interview, and thanks to Tony and Janet for organizing this, and thanks to all for joining. Another great presentation that we added to our roster of interviews, and we can share the interview with you through online or through the YouTube channel that we are establishing. So to that effect, thank you all, and we'll talk soon. One final thing, that in case you want to join, the Luxembourg Chamber is organizing a golf outing on October 5th. For those who haven't been able to go outside, this would be the opportunity. So look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you all.
All
Thank
right.
you, Rob, and thank you,
Goodbye.
Seth and Monica. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Robert, thank you, Seth. Take care.
Bye.